Fiscal policy is a critical tool used by governments to manage national economic health, affecting taxation, spending, and borrowing. Under Presidents Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the United States has seen significant contrasts in fiscal approaches. These differences have shaped economic outcomes, including growth rates, income inequality, and government debt. Biden's administration has focused on expanding social programs and tackling climate change, while Trump's policies centered on tax cuts and deregulation to stimulate business and economic growth. This video highlights the top 10 differences between Biden's and Trump's fiscal policies, offering insights into their unique approaches to managing the U.S. economy. 1. Tax policy: progressive versus supply side. One of the most fundamental differences between Biden's and Trump's fiscal policies is their approach to taxation. Trump's tax cuts, implemented in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, were primarily aimed at corporations and high-income earners, with the belief that reducing taxes on businesses would stimulate investment and economic growth, supply-side economics. In contrast, Biden advocates for a more progressive tax system, proposing higher taxes on corporations and individuals earning over $400,000 annually, while aiming to provide tax relief to the middle class. Biden's tax plan focuses on increasing revenues for social programs and reducing income inequality. 2. Government spending: infrastructure and social programs versus defense and corporate benefits. Biden's fiscal policy prioritizes expanding government spending on infrastructure, healthcare, and social welfare programs. His American Jobs Plan and American Families Plan focus on funding education, childcare, paid leave, and green energy initiatives. This contrasts with Trump's fiscal approach, which emphasized defense spending, tax cuts for businesses, and deregulation. While Trump supported increased military spending, Biden's policies focus more on domestic priorities, such as healthcare and climate change mitigation, with less emphasis on defense. 3. Climate change: investment in green energy versus deregulation. Biden's fiscal policies include significant investment in green energy and climate change initiatives. His administration aims to transition to renewable energy sources, reduce carbon emissions, and create green jobs. The American Jobs Plan includes funding for clean energy projects and electric vehicle infrastructure. On the other hand, Trump rolled back environmental regulations, arguing that deregulation would benefit industries and foster economic growth. Trump's fiscal policies favored fossil fuels and energy independence, while Biden's focus is on combating climate change and transitioning to a green economy. 4. Deficit and debt management: expansion versus curbing deficits. Trump's fiscal policies resulted in a substantial increase in the federal deficit and national debt, largely due to the tax cuts and increased government spending on defense. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act alone was estimated to add approximately $1.5 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. While Trump argued that tax cuts would stimulate economic growth and ultimately pay for themselves, the actual outcome was a significant increase in the national debt. In contrast, Biden's policies include proposals for tax hikes on the wealthiest Americans and corporations to fund increased social spending. Biden's approach focuses on reducing the deficit over time, although his plans also entail substantial spending in the short term to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and stimulate economic recovery. 5. Social welfare: expansion of benefits versus restricting access. Biden's fiscal policies prioritize expanding social welfare programs. His administration has proposed expanding the Affordable Care Act, ACA, implementing universal pre-kindergarten, and enhancing child tax credits. His approach includes a focus on reducing poverty and improving access to health care. Trump, by contrast, pursued efforts to reduce government spending on social welfare, including attempts to repeal the ACA and limit access to social programs like food stamps. Trump's fiscal policy was less focused on direct social welfare and more on creating conditions for economic growth through tax cuts and deregulation. 6. Trade policy: multilateralism versus protectionism. Biden's fiscal approach supports multilateral trade agreements and international cooperation. Under his leadership, the U.S. has rejoined global agreements like the Paris Agreement on climate change and sought to restore alliances with European and Asian partners. His policies aim to strengthen the global economic order and reduce trade tensions. In contrast, Trump's fiscal policies embraced protectionism, with an emphasis on tariffs and renegotiating trade agreements. Trump's trade war with China and his "America First" approach to trade aimed to protect American industries from foreign competition and encourage domestic manufacturing. 7. Healthcare. Expanding access versus reducing regulation. Biden's fiscal policies emphasize expanding healthcare access through the ACA and increasing government spending on public health initiatives. He has proposed expanding Medicaid and reducing prescription drug costs. Biden's approach is rooted in improving the accessibility and affordability of healthcare for Americans, particularly through public options and subsidies. Trump, on the other hand, pursued a healthcare policy focused on deregulation, reducing the role of the federal government, and attempting to repeal the ACA. Trump's fiscal policy aimed at giving states more control over Medicaid and healthcare policies. 8. Labor policies. Worker protections versus deregulation. Biden has supported policies that strengthen worker protections, such as raising the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour and increasing union support. His fiscal policy has a strong focus on ensuring fair wages, benefits, and working conditions for American workers. Biden also seeks to address income inequality through progressive tax policies. Trump, in contrast, sought to reduce regulatory burdens on businesses, including labor regulations. His administration rolled back workplace protections and emphasized a free market approach, with less government intervention in labor relations. 9. Immigration policy. Pathways to citizenship versus restriction. Biden's fiscal policy includes provisions aimed at addressing immigration reform, offering a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and increasing government spending on immigration-related services. His policies focus on making immigration processes more inclusive and human-centered. Trump's fiscal policies, on the other hand, were marked by a restrictive immigration agenda, including building a border wall, limiting asylum claims, and reducing the number of refugees and legal immigrants allowed into the country. Trump's fiscal policy included cuts to programs benefiting immigrant populations and a tougher stance on immigration enforcement. 10. COVID-19 response. Stimulus versus limited aid. The COVID-19 pandemic tested both Trump's and Biden's fiscal policies. Under Trump, the administration passed several stimulus packages, including the CARES Act, which provided direct payments, unemployment benefits, and business loans to help Americans weather the crisis. However, Trump's fiscal approach was criticized for not providing enough comprehensive relief. Under Biden, additional stimulus packages were passed, including a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that provided extended unemployment benefits, stimulus checks, and funding for vaccine distribution. Biden's fiscal response was more expansive, with a focus on providing long-term economic relief to those affected by the pandemic. The fiscal policies of Presidents Biden and Trump reflect divergent approaches to managing the U.S. economy. Biden's focus on progressive taxation, social welfare expansion, and climate change contrasts sharply with Trump's emphasis on tax cuts, deregulation, and defense spending. While both administrations have faced unique challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic, their approaches to fiscal policy have shaped the nation's economic trajectory. Biden's policies aim to expand the social safety net and invest in long-term economic growth, whereas Trump's policies prioritized stimulating business activity and reducing government intervention. Understanding these differences is key to grasping the broader economic outcomes of each administration and their impact on Americans' daily lives.